I get it. When you're looking at a pre-built gaming rig, the excitement is mixed with a healthy dose of doubt. You've probably seen a dozen ads promising instant 4K glory, and you're wondering if you'll end up with a box that sits in the corner, humming, while you're still waiting for a game to load. I was in that exact spot a few weeks ago, scrolling through options, trying to figure out whether the msi Codex Z2 would actually give me the performance I need without forcing me to dip into the emergency fund for a new GPU later. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The first thing I did was step back from the headline specs. AMD R7-8700F, RTX 4060 Ti, 32GB DDR5, 1TB NVMe SSD, and ask myself the real questions any gamer faces. Will this machine handle the titles I play at the settings I like? How noisy will it be during a marathon session? And, perhaps most importantly, will I feel comfortable spending this much on a system that's already assembled? The Codex Z2 sits in a sweet spot for people who want a ready-to-play experience without the hassle of building, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Let's talk about the everyday setup. The chassis is deliberately minimalistic, no flashy RGB strips, just a clean black front that blends nicely into a home office or a modest gaming nook. There's a single USB-C port on the front, which is handy for plugging in a headset or a fast charging cable without digging around the back. The power button is a small, illuminated circle turn on the bright lights, they say, and it does feel a touch more premium than the cheap plastic switches you see on budget boxes. The machine's footprint is about the size of a standard mid-tower, so it'll fit under most desks without crowding your space. Performance-wise, the R7-8700F is an 8-core, 16-thread CPU that still holds its own in modern titles. In my own testing running a mix of fast-paced shooters like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2 and more CPU-heavy games like Civilization 6, the CPU never became a bottleneck. Pair that with the RTX 4060 Ti and you get solid 1080p and decent 1440p frame rates. I was consistently pulling 100,110 frames per second in Apex Legends at high settings, and around 7,080 frames per second in Cyberpunk 2077 with ray tracing turned on at medium. For most gamers who play at 144Hz monitors, those numbers feel smooth enough to stay competitive without having to dial everything down to low. One of the practical strengths that often gets buried under the specs is the SSD. The 1TB NVMe drive loads games in seconds. Elden Ring boots up in under a minute, and texture streaming is practically invisible. This also means you're not constantly juggling external drives to free up space. The DDR5 32GB memory is overkill for most current games, but it future-proofs the system for the next few years and makes multitasking a breeze. I could have Discord, a web browser with a few tabs, and a game all running simultaneously without any hiccups. Cooling is another area where the Codex Z2 surprises. MSI markets it as cool while gaming, and the reality matches that claim. The system uses a dual-fan setup with a fairly aggressive exhaust design. Under load, the fans spin up to a respectable 2,200 revolutions per minute, but the noise stays around 35 dB, which is about the level of a normal conversation. In a small apartment, that's barely noticeable unless you're sitting right next to the case. The fans also have a slight RGB accent that you can enable if you want a touch of personality, but it's optional. No one forces you into a light show you don't like. Now, no machine is perfect, and the Codex Z2 has a few trade-offs worth flagging before you click Add to Cart. First, the GPU, while solid for 1080p 1440p, isn't a ticket to maxed-out 4K gaming. If you're the type who wants to push ultra settings at 4K with ray tracing on, you'll feel the performance dip quickly. The RTX 4060 Ti will still run those games, but you'll be looking at 4,050 frames per second unless you lower some settings. Second, upgrade potential is limited. The case has only one additional 2.5-inch drive bay and a single extra PCIe slot. If you ever want to add another SSD or a larger graphics card, you'll have to think carefully about space and power requirements. Lastly, the price point lands in the mid-range pre-built segment, which means you're paying a premium for the convenience of a ready Togo system. If you're comfortable building a PC yourself, you could probably assemble a comparable rig for a few $100s less. Who should walk away with this box? If you're a gamer who primarily plays titles like Fortnite, Valorant, Resident Evil Village, or even the occasional open-world adventure, and you want to jump straight into the experience without spending a weekend sorting parts, this is a solid pick. It's also a good fit for content creators who need a reliable workstation for streaming thanks to the 32GB of RAM and the fast SSD. You can run OBS, a browser, and a game simultaneously without choking the system.